Hey guys, and welcome to Functional Print Friday. A couple different things on the bench this week I want to take a look at. For those of you that have been in the channel for a while, you might recognize this multimeter. About a year ago, I did a video on this. I picked it up at a yard sale for dirt cheap, but it was missing the battery door. And I found a picture of what the battery door was supposed to look like online, and I drew one up, and it came out pretty nice. Rather happy with it. The one thing that I was never really happy with, though, is the color. I went with silver after trying several other colors because just nothing looked good with the color of this case. It's probably yellowed a bit, but the original color of just gear from this era, I don't know. There's just really nothing that looks good with it. Or so I thought. We'll get there. But I've had the silver door on mine for, well, since I made it last year, and I'm perfectly happy with it. Obviously it doesn't match, but it's complementary, at least I would say. But a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman from Australia reached out and said that he had seen the video that I did creating the battery door for this, but he doesn't have a 3D printer. It's not a hobby he wants to get into, and asked really nicely if I could make a couple and send them his way. And I said, yep, of course I can do that. So a couple days after I agreed to make the parts, I actually wrote the gentleman back and I said, hey, can you hold out for a little while, because I want to see if I can get a filament that is going to be a better color match to this. I said, I'll send you some ones in silver regardless, but let me send you a couple in another color as well, because about a month or so ago, eSun reached out and said, hey, we'd like to send you some filament to use on the channel. And originally I declined their offer because their spools are cardboard, and I've just found cardboard spools in the AMS not to be the best mix, and generally, like, colored stuff, it's probably going to go in the AMS for multicolored prints. And they actually wrote back and said, no worries, we understand. We actually have our engineers working on that. They're going to, like heat and glue seal the ends of the spools because I'm, not the only one that's raised that issue. So it's awesome to hear that they're listening. But when I went to look for other colors that might work for this, I came across a filament from eSun that looked like the color might be close. So I wrote him back and I said, hey, you know what? Actually, if you send me a roll of your bone white PLA Plus, I'll check it out. Let me grab it. So I've already opened this and used it for this print, obviously, or we wouldn't be looking at it in the video. But let me get this out of here. So take a look at that. It's pretty close, right? I mean, it's not exactly the same shade, but it's a lot closer, and I would say it is complementary. And I've already made one of these up. Let me grab it. All right, and there's that guy on there, and I think that looks pretty good. It's not a color match, no, but it's in the same color family, and it complements the color of this very nicely. It doesn't stand out anywhere near as much as the silver. And I'll tell you, I can't find any other colors even close to this. There's a lot of companies that make sort of a beige, or even different, sort of off-whites. And sometimes in the pictures, they look closer to this color. But then if you go find stuff that people have actually printed with it, where you get a better idea of what the color looks like in comparison to other colors, most of them are more like a pinkish beige, like this guy. If I grab my color chips here, you can see what I'm talking about. So here's that bone white back here. And the only thing even remotely close to it is this straw color from 03D, which is also a cool filament, but clearly wouldn't work out for this because it's got kind of like a fleck or something in there. But again, if you look across this color group, there's nothing even close to this bone white. I really like this. It's not that type of color that is, I don't know, like an exciting color that you'd want to make something that really stands out, right? But for projects like this, for restoration stuff, or where you want the part to be kind of understated, you want it to blend in and look more natural, check this stuff out. So thanks to eSun for sending this over and making that print possible. These guys are super nice. I mean, especially since I basically told them, no, I don't want your stuff, and then wrote them back like a month later and said, actually, can you send me a roll of this bone white PLA Plus, because I think it might work out. And it did. So thanks again, eSun, and I'll link this stuff down in the description if you want to check it out. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is actually the printer that got me into this hobby. The first printer that I ever had was an anet A8 that I bought as a kit in December of 2016. And for those of you that have also been in the hobby for a long time, This was really the first machine that was an affordable copy of the Prusa i3 that was like a functional machine. I mean, there was other stuff out there at the time, and you could argue that this machine wasn't particularly functional either. It did have some challenges, like the stock switches on the board, the stock MOSFETs on the board were really, really undersized for switching the heat bed in particular, but even the hot end as well. So if you didn't upgrade to external MOSFETs, these things had a tendency of burning your house down. Yeah, this hobby has really come a long way to the turnkey bamboo machines that we have today. And I actually stopped using this machine for a long time. I picked up a Prusa Mark III a couple years after I got into the hobby, and that served me for quite a few years before I picked up the bamboo machines. And I still use the Prusa Mark III all the time as well. But I recently started actually using the anet A8 again. And this machine doesn't look anything like it originally did when I purchased it. As was the norm in the hobby, I immediately started tinkering and upgrading the machine. And in fact, the main problem with this machine is it's like a laser cut acrylic, I think. And the way that they designed the gantry on the machine, the whole thing would rock back and forth. There was nothing that actually held it rigid. They were relying on a small contact point between two pieces of acrylic and some screws kind of holding it tight to keep it stiff and not rack back and forth. And that didn't really work. I mean, if you ran this thing at any more than about 10 millimeters per second, it was just like swinging all around on the desk. And I, on like a big piece of paper, designed a monolithic piece that would actually mount over the acrylic frame. Cut that out. I transferred that to a sheet of aluminum, marked all the drill holes where everything would need to be, center punched them, and then I cut that out on a bandsaw and sort of laminated the front faces of the acrylic on the machine with this thick piece of aluminum plate. And that significantly improved this printer. And, I did a bunch of other stuff to it as well. I put some adjustable belt tensioners on it. I designed some parts for the front to allow tensioning of the belt for the y-axis. And I really thought I was ready to let this machine go about a year ago. And it was kind of sitting in storage. I kept walking by it and thinking, oh man, what do I do with that thing? I don't want to throw it out, but I just don't want to use it anymore either, because my workflow had moved on so much from this machine. When I originally picked this up, slicers were nowhere near, where they are today. And I had bought a copy of Simplify 3D because at the time, back in 2016, 2017, that was by far the best slicer. But it was real money. I mean, I think the Simplify 3D software at the time cost as much as I paid for the printer, or maybe even a few dollars more. I can't remember, but it was totally worth it. But modern slicers are just so much better, and I was using a mix of Bamboo Studio and the newest version of OrcaSlicer, and I just stopped using this machine altogether. I didn't want to go back and open Simplify 3D where I had a working profile for this printer, slice it in there. I'd forget where all the controls were. Export the G code, upload it to Octoprint, then load it from Octoprint, preheat the printer, start the job. It's just a pain. I mean, my other machines had spoiled me, particularly since I had the bamboo machines on top of the Prusa, Mark III. But recently, I started switching over to using OrcaSlicer in the hopes of basically replacing OrcaSlicer for my other machines. And it's actually that Neptune Max that I picked up that sort of kicked off this process, because I wanted to use OrcaSlicer for the Neptune, but I was still using OrcaSlicer for the Mark III, and of course I'm using Bamboo Studio for my X1C, the P1S, and the A1. So now I'm working 3 different slicers, which was far less than ideal. So I started trying to build profiles I built a profile first for my Mark III in OrcaSlicer. And to be fair, I mean, there's pretty good profiles in there. I didn't have to start from scratch. I just had to make some modifications to the built-in profile for the Mark III series. in OrcaSlicer, and I got that working really well. And the cool thing about OrcaSlicer is, if you're familiar with Bambu Studio, when you go into the device tab, you actually see what's going on the printer. You get basically, not only a status of what the printer's doing, but you can bring up a video feed for the printer as well if it's one of the Bambu printers that has a camera on it. And you can do the same thing in OrcaSlicer. If the printer that you've added to OrcaSlicer is either running Klipper or Octoprint, you can actually put the IP address of the printer in, and when you go to that device tab, you're going to see the status of the printer. You're basically seeing the same thing that you would see if you went to the web page for that printer, either for Klipper or for Octoprint. But it's nice that it's integrated right into OrcaSlicer. You don't have to, you don't have to open a separate tab for it. And if you've got a camera on that machine, you'll actually see the video feed from the camera as well. And I was really pleased with how I had this set up for the Neptune 4 Max and for my Prusa i3 Mark III. The Neptune 4 Max runs Klipper, straight out of the box, and I pretty much always had a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint on my Prusa i3 Mark III. And I thought, geez, I wonder if I could get the anet A8 working in OrcaSlicer. And of course, there's not a profile for it, but I still had my very finely tuned working profile in Simplify 3D. So I thought, how hard could it really be to go through and kind of just try and transfer all the settings and do a little trial and error. And it took a while. It actually took a couple hours to get everything sort of set up and converted to the way that you configure it in OrcaSlicer. And I ran into some other issues too with things like the starting G-code. I had to rewrite that to be compatible with the way that OrcaSlicer starts sending G-code after the starting G-code runs. But none of this stuff was insurmountable. It'd just been a little while since I'd gotten in and sort of tweaked things at that level. But long story short, I now have a really good working profile for the anet A8 in OrcaSlicer. So if you're watching this video, if you're one of the 7 other people that still has an anet A8 and you are using it and would like to move to a modern slicer, hey, I got you. Check down in the description of this video. There'll be a link to where you can grab this stuff. I'll share my profiles from OrcaSlicer. But the real icing on the cake was when I remembered that I used to run Octoprint on a Raspberry Pi for the anet A8 as well. And I was using the anet A8 and the Prusa Mark III at the same time, so I didn't just like switch over the Pi to the Mark III. I picked up another Pi, and when I, quote unquote, decommissioned the A8 and set it aside, I just took the Pi and I threw it back in my box of Pi stuff, but I'd never reused it. And I grabbed it out and I reconnected it and it booted up, and it's still running version 1.3.1 from I don't know, I think like October of 2018 was when that was released. But hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I never upgraded it because everything was working so well. I didn't want to risk, breaking it. And believe it or not, even the version of Octoprint from 2018 still supported the standard API that they maintain today, or at least I guess the base set of commands, because I added the Octoprint interface into OrcaSlicer for the anet A8, and it works. So I now have the full feature set of OrcaSlicer for my anet A8. But if you're not familiar with OrcaSlicer, you're probably wondering why I'm so excited. Well, let me show you. Okay, so here we are in OrcaSlicer, and I've got my profile for the anet A8 that I built selected, and I even modeled the bed for that printer, which the bed on that machine is just a thick chunk of aluminum plate that you place masking tape over to print on. And I even modeled where the masking tape meets up. That's what these lines that you see are across here, so that I know as I'm placing objects on the build plate whether they're going to fall over that seam in the masking tape, because that does show up on the bottom. And this is well before like flexible steel build plates or PEI sheets or any of that stuff. Back when this printer came out, everyone was pretty much printing on either masking tape, Kapton tape, or glass. And I opted for the masking tape because that's what the printer originally shipped with. And it's easy to get a hold of. It's easy to replace, and actually kind of like the texture from it. It gives you sort of like a crinkly matte finish on the bottom. So we've got our STL already loaded up here. Let's go ahead and slice this. All right, this is sliced up now. So my old workflow would be if I had sliced this in Simplify 3D, I would now save this, to disk. and then I would log into Octoprint. I would upload the file. I would wait for it to upload. I would click on the file to load it and make it the active file, and then I would hit print. Well, from OrcaSlicer, again, since it has API integration to Octoprint, all I have to do is just hit print and then upload and print. And this is going to shoot this directly over to Octoprint. And if we go over to the device tab, we can actually see what's going on with the printer. We can see state printing, user API client. It's already loaded that up, and it is probably warming up the printer. Yep, we can see it is now warming up the heat bed, and when this guy warms up, it is just going to start and run this job, and we can come right back into the device tab and actually monitor that through the video feed right here from Octoprint. So I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks. So let me know down in the comments below, what was the first 3D printer that you had? What's the printer that got you into the hobby? Do you still have it? Does it still work? Do you still use it? And if you haven't checked out OrcaSlicer, definitely check it out. There's so many printers in there that already have profiles built out, but even if yours doesn't, as we learned in this video, I mean, it's not terribly difficult to go in and build a working profile for a machine that is 8 years old. So guys, as always, thanks for hanging out for this week's video. I really enjoyed being able to share this stuff with you guys, and I really enjoy seeing the stuff that you guys come up with and share with me down in the comments of these videos. There's some really good ideas that have come out of past comments from videos in the past, and again, just really appreciate when you guys take the time to do that. And hopefully, if you've got an old machine, kicking around collecting dust somewhere, maybe this gives you the inspiration to pull it out and kind of modernize it with connecting up Octoprint and checking out OrcaSlicer and being able to automate your workflow and just have another machine to run parts on. And guys, if this is your first time checking out a video here on the channel, this is a functional printing channel. We do a new functional print or cover something like this every single week. So if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into that more design and engineering side of the hobby versus the multicolored junk, check out some of my other videos. And if you enjoyed this, hit the like button. And if you really enjoyed it and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And guys, if you do, I'll see you next Friday.